marketplace was loud, filled with shouts, the smell of dust, and the clinking of chains. Dozens of alien buyers moved between cages, their eyes cold, their hands pointing at the slaves inside. The auction block stood in the center, a wooden stage with harsh lights shining down. It was a place of humiliation, a place where lives were sold like meat. Among the cages, one small figure sat quietly. Her wrists were bruised from iron cuffs, her ankles rubbed raw from chains. She had silver-gray skin and dark hair that fell across her face. Her eyes were large and bright, but they no longer carried hope. For hours she had been displayed to buyers, and for hours she had been ignored. The auctioneer shouted her description. His voice was sharp, cruel, and full of mockery. "Lot number 91. A young female, strong enough for work, but no buyer yet. Who will take her?" "Cheap price." "Very cheap." The crowd laughed. Some aliens whispered insults. Some spat on the ground near her cage. "Worthless," one said. "Too weak," another mocked. A tall merchant chuckled. "If no one wants her, throw her to the pits." "At least the beasts will eat." The girl lowered her head. She knew the words were true in their world here. Value was measured only in strength or beauty. She had neither. Her body was thin, her back bent from hunger. She had been beaten for mistakes, punished for being slow. Now no one wanted her. She was nothing but a burden. But in the crowd, one pair of eyes did not look away. A man taller than the rest stood quietly near the back. He wore rough human clothes, a jacket patched in many places. His face was hidden under a hood, but his gaze was fixed on the girl. The auctioneer grew frustrated. He slammed a stick against the stage. "Oh, 5 credits!" "Only 5. Will no one buy this piece of trash?" Silence. No hands rose, no voices offered even that small price. The girl's throat tightened, her heart pounded with fear. She knew what came next if she was not sold. The guards would drag her away. She had seen it before. Unsold slaves were thrown to worse fates. Some vanished in dark alleys. Some were sent to cruel experiments. None returned, her eyes filled with tears. She bit her lip to stay silent. She had promised herself she would not beg. But her body shook and her lips whispered a soundless prayer. The auctioneer sneered. "Even free, she is worthless." He laughed, his teeth sharp. His assistants pushed her forward onto the block. The chains rattled as she stumbled. The crowd jeered. Some threw small stones. Others turned away with disgust. Still, in the corner of her vision, she saw the hooded figure. He had not laughed, he had not moved. His eyes stayed on her, steady, strong. Why was he watching? What did he see in her that others did not? Her knees grew weak. She felt the stage under her feet. Her mind screamed for it to end. If death came now, she would welcome it. Anything was better than the endless chain. The auctioneer shouted again. 3 credits. Who will take her for 3? No one answered. The silence was louder than the shouts. The girl lifted her head just once. Her eyes searched the crowd, and they met his. For a single heartbeat, everything froze. She saw something strange in his gaze, not greed, not cruelty, but something warmer, something unfamiliar in this place of chains. It was pity. It was anger. And it was dangerous. The guards moved closer to push her back down. The auctioneer was ready to end the sale. The girl closed her eyes. Her lips trembled, and without thinking, she whispered into the empty air, "Please, someone." The words were soft, but they carried. They reached the human standing in the crowd. For the first time that night, he moved. His hand lifted slightly. His voice, deep and calm, cut through the noise. "I'll take her," he said. The marketplace fell silent. Buyers turned their heads. The auctioneer's mouth opened in shock. The girl's heart stopped for a moment. A human buying a worthless slave no one wanted? Gasps spread through the crowd. Some laughed nervously. Some whispered rumors, others glared. The air grew heavy, dangerous. The girl's eyes widened. Her chains rattled as her body shook. She could not believe what she had heard. Her lips parted, her voice trembling. Why him? Why now? What did it mean? And in that moment, hope, tiny, fragile, and forbidden, sparked inside her chest. But in this cruel world, hope was a dangerous thing. The marketplace froze after the human spoke. For a moment, even the chains stopped rattling. Every eye turned toward him. A human buyer in a slave market was rare. And when it did happen, the reason was never kindness. The auctioneer blinked, his mouth twisting into a grin. "What did you say?" he asked, his voice dripped with disbelief. The man stepped forward, his boots crunching on the dusty ground. His hood still covered most of his face, but his voice was steady. "I said, I'll take her." A wave of murmurs swept through the crowd. Some aliens laughed, their sharp teeth glinting, others sneered. A thick-scaled trader hissed, "Humans don't waste money on trash." Another spat. "He must be drunk." The girl on the block could hardly breathe. Her heart pounded against her ribs. She thought she had imagined it, but now the human stood closer, and there was no mistake. His hand held a coin chip, the glow of credits flashing in the dim light. The auctioneer licked his lips. Credits were credits after hours of failure. This sale could finally end. "Very well, human. Pay the price and she's yours." He slammed the stick down. Chains rattled as the guards pulled her forward. The girl stumbled, her body shaking. She tried to understand. Why would he choose her? The one no one wanted. Her lips trembled. "Why?" She whispered so low only she could hear it. The crowd did not celebrate the sale. Instead, whispers turned darker. Rumors grew like fire in dry grass. A human buying her? Dangerous. Maybe he has plans. Maybe he knows something we don't. Some eyes burned with greed, others with suspicion. The girl felt those eyes on her back, sharp and cruel, as the guards shoved her into the human's grasp. He caught her gently, almost too gently for such a place. For the first time in her life, she was not handled like a piece of property. His grip was firm but not cruel. She blinked in shock. Staring up at him from behind messy strands of hair, the auctioneer shouted, "Deal closed, next slave!" His voice already moving on, but the murmurs did not stop. The crowd was not done watching. The human placed a cloak around her shoulders. Covering the bruises, her chains still clinked. But now her steps were guided by him. Not by the guards. Each movement felt strange, unreal. She expected him to drag her. She expected pain. Yet he walked slowly, almost matching her weak pace. He said nothing. His silence was heavy, but it was not cruel. As they moved away from the stage, voices followed. "He'll regret it," someone laughed. "The girl is worthless," another hissed. "Humans always break things," a merchant added with a smirk. The girl lowered her head, her cheeks burned. Not from shame, she had felt that all her life, but from confusion. Why had he chosen her against all reason? At the edge of the market, two guards blocked the path. Their faces stern. "Human," one growled. "You're taking property out, you must register. Or maybe you'd like to sell her back to us for half the price." The human's jaw tightened. His hand gripped the chain near her wrist, but not to hurt her. He raised his eyes to the guards. His voice cut sharp and steady. "She's mine now, you had your chance to profit." "Move," the guards shifted. They had seen many buyers, most weak, most afraid. But something in his tone was different. It carried weight, it carried warning. They hesitated, then stepped aside. The girl's heart raced. She glanced at him, still trembling. The marketplace behind them roared again with laughter and shouts. But ahead lay silence. When they reached a narrow street, far from the auction's lights, he finally spoke. His voice was low, almost gentle. "Are you hurt?" The girl's eyes widened. She could not answer. No one had ever asked her that before. Not once. Her lips opened, but no sound came out. She shook her head slowly. Even though it was not true, he looked at her bruises, his brow tightening under the hood. "You need food and rest," he said. His tone was not one of command, but of certainty. Her chest ached with a feeling she did not understand. It was not fear, it was not pain. It was something new, almost unbearable. She dared to whisper, "Why? Why did you buy me?" The human paused. For a long moment he said nothing. His boots scraped against the stone path. His cloak brushed against her weak frame. Finally, he answered, his voice rough. "Because no one else would." The words were simple, but they struck deep. Her throat closed, her eyes burned. She wanted to cry, but no tears came. Behind them, in the shadows of the market, eyes watched. Merchants, hunters, and worse. They had seen the human take what no one wanted. Some saw a fool, others saw an opportunity. The girl did not know it yet, but danger had begun to follow. Every step beside him pulled her further into a storm she could not escape. Still, for the first time in her life, her chains felt lighter. The night air outside the auction house was cold and sharp. The noise of the market faded behind them, but the girl could still hear echoes of laughter. She walked with her head low, the heavy iron chain still locked around her wrists. Every step reminded her of what she was. Every rattle told her she was not free. The human walked beside her in silence. His hood was still drawn low, his step steady and sure. Unlike others, he did not yank the chain or strike her to move faster. Instead, he kept his pace slow, as if he understood her weakness. The street they followed was narrow, dim lights flickering on rusted poles. Alien faces peeked from shadowed corners. Some stared in curiosity, some in hunger. None dared step close to the human. His presence carried weight. The girl felt her stomach twist. She had not eaten in days, her lips were cracked. Her knees weak, she stumbled once, the chain pulling at her wrists. She expected the sting of a whip, the harsh pull of anger, but instead a hand caught her shoulder. Firm and steady, careful, the human said. His voice was low, rough but not cruel. She froze at his touch. Her body trembled. Her eyes lifted slightly, meeting his for the briefest moment before she looked down again. She whispered, Why do you care? He did not answer at once. Instead, he reached into his cloak and pulled out a small flask. He held it toward her. Drink, he said simply. Her eyes widened. She had never been offered water like this. Not without command, not without punishment to follow. Hesitation burned in her chest, but thirst was stronger. Slowly, she raised the flask, the cool liquid sliding down her throat. It felt like life itself, she gasped softly when it was gone. Her voice shook. You could have chosen anyone, why me? The human walked on, his face hidden, his silence heavy. Finally, after long moments, he spoke. Because no one should be left like that. The girl's heart clenched. She did not understand his words. In her world, kindness did not exist. Only chains, only cruelty. Yet his tone carried truth. They turned into a wider road, filled with flickering neon signs. The city around them buzzed with noise. Merchants shouted, lights flashed, air cars roared overhead. But among the crowd, eyes followed them, predators hidden in plain sight. A group of rough aliens leaned against a wall, their eyes narrowing at the human and the chained girl. One smirked, Hey, human, sell her to us. We'll give double. The girl stiffened, fear rushing through her veins. She waited for him to bargain, to trade her like she always had been traded. But the man's steps did not slow. His voice cut like steel. She's not for sale, the aliens laughed, their voices echoed. Not for sale? Then what do you want her for, human? She's worthless. The human stopped walking. His shoulders squared. For a moment the street fell silent. His hood lifted slightly, and his eyes glared like fire. Walk away, he said. Something in his tone made even the toughest step back. The laughter died. The air grew tense, the girl's breath caught. She realized the human was not like the others. His presence carried danger, but not against her, against anyone who tried to harm her. They moved on quickly, but she could not stop glancing at him. Questions spun in her mind. Why risk trouble for her? Why protect her when she was nothing? The road stretched long. Her body grew weaker, her chains heavier. She stumbled again, nearly falling. He slowed. Matching her steps, We're close, he muttered finally. They reached the edge of the city, where the tall towers gave way to broken alleys and half-ruined buildings. He led her into a quiet street where no crowds gathered, no merchants shouted, no hunters waited. The girl looked around, confusion in her eyes. Why bring me here? She asked. Her voice was fragile, uncertain. He glanced at her chains. His jaw tightened. Because you're not safe out there. The words struck her harder than the chains ever had. Not safe. No one had ever cared for her safety. She had been beaten, mocked, sold. Yet here a human spoke as if her life mattered. She shook her head, whispering, I don't understand. What do you want from me? The human stopped walking. He turned slightly toward her. His eyes shadowed beneath the hood. For a long time he said nothing. The silence grew heavy, her heart pounded. Finally he spoke, slow and firm. I don't want anything from you. His gaze hardened. But they wanted you gone, thrown away. I couldn't let that happen. Her throat closed, her eyes burned. She bit her lip hard to stop the sob that tried to escape. No one had ever spoken words like that to her. But deep inside, fear still lingered. Was this real? Or was it a trick, a game before the pain? She lowered her head, whispering, If you lie, it will break me. The human looked at her for a long moment. His voice softened. Then I won't lie. She closed her eyes. Her chains rattled, but for the first time, they felt less heavy, still there, still cold, but no longer the end of her world. Yet neither of them knew the eyes watching from the shadows. Men who had followed since the auction. Men who saw not kindness but opportunity. The shackled road was not only the path away from the market, it was the beginning of a storm, and with each step danger grew closer. The road grew darker as they left the heart of the city. The lights of the market were gone, replaced by broken lamps and silent alleys. The girl's chain still clinked softly with each step. Her legs were weak, her body trembling, but the human kept walking at her side, steady as a shadow. He finally stopped at a narrow iron door, rust covering its edges. The building was half ruined. Its walls cracked, windows broken. To her, it looked abandoned, a place where thieves might hide. Or worse, she shivered, unsure why he had brought her here. The human pushed the door open with a heavy creak. Inside was dim, lit only by a small lamp hanging from the ceiling. The air smelled of dust and old wood, but compared to the market it felt quiet. "This is safe," he said simply. Guiding her inside, his voice was rough but steady. He closed the door behind them, locking out the city's noise. The girl stood still, her eyes darting around. There was a small table, a broken chair, and a bed in the corner covered with a blanket. It was no palace, no mansion. Yet to her it looked unreal. She had only ever known cages, stone floors, and the sharp bite of chains. She whispered, "Safe?" The word felt strange on her tongue, like something she had forgotten. The human nodded. He walked closer. His hand reached for the chain at her wrists. She flinched instantly, pulling back, her eyes wide with fear. Memories of beatings and punishments filled her mind. "I won't hurt you," he said firmly. His tone carried weight, calm but commanding. Slowly, carefully, he took the key from his pocket and slid it into the lock. With a soft click, the iron cuffs opened. The girl stared in disbelief. Her hands trembled as the chains fell heavy to the floor. For the first time in years, her wrists were free. The skin beneath was raw, bruised purple and red. She rubbed them gently, her heart racing. "Why?" she asked in a whisper. Her voice cracked. "Why would you do this?" He set the chains aside, his face still shadowed beneath the hood. "Because you're not a thing," he said quietly. "You don't deserve to live like that." Her throat tightened. She could not understand. No one had ever spoken those words to her. No one had ever seen her as anything but property. Yet here stood a stranger, a human of all things, treating her as if she mattered. Tears welled in her eyes. She turned away, ashamed of her weakness, but her body shook uncontrollably. She collapsed onto the chair. Covering her face with her hands, the human moved silently. He placed a small loaf of bread and a tin cup of water on the table in front of her. He did not command her to eat, did not force her. He only said, "It's yours." She looked at the food as if it were gold. Her fingers trembled as she reached out. Biting into the bread hungrily, the taste was simple, dry, but to her it was sweeter than anything she had ever eaten. He watched quietly, not interrupting, not mocking. When she finished, she whispered, "Thank you." Her voice was so soft it was almost lost. But he heard. He pulled the chair closer and sat across from her, his hands folded, his gaze steady. Finally, he asked, "What's your name?" She froze, her eyes widened. "Name?" The question struck her like lightning. She shook her head slowly. I don't have one." He frowned, his eyes narrowed slightly. "Everyone has a name." Her chest ached. She lowered her head, whispering, "They called me slave, worthless trash. That is all." The human's jaw tightened. His hands clenched into fists on the table. He muttered something under his breath, too low for her to hear. Then he looked back at her, his voice firm. "Then I will give you one." Her eyes lifted, confusion filling them. She searched his face, half afraid, half curious. "Why?" she asked again, her voice shaking. "Because," he said, leaning forward, "without a name, they own you. With a name, you own yourself." The girl's lips trembled. A spark lit inside her chest, fragile but bright. She nodded slowly, unable to speak. Silence filled the room. But it was not heavy. It was new, gentle. She sat with her wrists free, her stomach no longer empty. For the first time, she felt like she was not just surviving but living, even if only for a moment. But beyond the walls of the shelter, danger stirred in the market. Whispers of the human's strange purchase spread quickly. Hunters, merchants, and slavers were curious. Some were angry, some greedy. They wanted to know why a human would choose the girl no one else wanted. And some wanted to take her back inside the shelter. The girl's eyes began to close. Exhaustion pulling her down, she fought it. Afraid that if she slept, this fragile piece would vanish. But the human placed the blanket around her shoulders, his voice low. "Rest, you're safe here." Her heart thudded in her chest. She did not believe in safety, but his words carried a weight she could not resist. Slowly, she let her eyes close as sleep took her. Her last thought was not of chains or fear or death, but of his voice, firm and strange, promising something she had never known. Freedom morning came slowly over the city. The gray light touched the broken walls of the shelter. Inside, the girl opened her eyes. For a moment she forgot where she was. She touched her wrists, expecting the bite of chains, but her skin was bare, only bruises left behind. Her breath caught. It was not a dream. She was free inside these walls. At least for now, the human was already awake, sitting near the door with a small device in his hand. His hood was off now. His face was rough, marked by years of hard work, his eyes sharp, scanning the street through a narrow crack in the wood. The girl sat up slowly, whispering, "Why are you watching?" He didn't turn. His voice was calm but firm. "Because they're watching too." Her body froze. Fear crept back into her chest. She moved closer, peeking through the crack. Outside, the street looked quiet, but in the corners of shadows, shapes moved, men leaning against walls. Pretending to smoke, aliens crouched low as if fixing carts. But their eyes never left the shelter hunters. She had seen their type before. They worked for merchants and slave masters. They stalked runaways, dragged them back. They were cruel and patient. Her throat tightened. They want me back," she whispered. The human nodded slightly. "Yes." His hand tightened on the small weapon at his side. "But they won't take you," she trembled. Her heart raced. She knew these men. She knew their knives, their laughter, their cruelty. She shook her head, whispering, "You don't understand. They'll kill you. They'll kill both of us." He finally turned. His eyes met hers, strong and steady. "Then let them try." The words sent a shiver down her spine. He spoke them not with pride, not with arrogance, but with a deep certainty that unsettled her. Hours passed slowly. The hunters did not attack, not yet. They waited like wolves outside a campfire, patient, watching. She could feel their hunger through the walls. Every time she closed her eyes, she imagined chains on her wrists again, imagined the laughter as they dragged her back. The human broke the silence. "Eat," he said, placing another piece of bread on the table. She hesitated, then whispered, "If I eat, if I rest, what if they come when I sleep?" He answered without hesitation, "I'll be awake." The words were simple, but they sank into her chest for the first time. Someone promised to stand between her and danger. She picked up the bread with shaking hands and ate slowly, her eyes never leaving the door. By nightfall, the hunters grew bold. Shadows gathered closer. A stone hit the wall outside. A laugh echoed through the alley. The girl jumped, clutching her thin blanket. The human stood, pulling the door bar into place. His voice was calm. "They're testing us." Her body shook. She moved closer to him, her voice breaking. "Why? Why not let them take me? It would be easier. Safer for you." He looked at her, his eyes hard. "Because you're not theirs anymore." Tears filled her eyes. She pressed her face into her hands. The words were too much, too heavy. They didn't make sense in her world, yet he spoke them like a law. Unbreakable outside, boots scraped on stone. Someone slammed a fist against the door. "Human!" A voice snarled, rough and cruel. "Give her back, she's not worth your trouble." The girl flinched, fear twisting inside her. Her chains rattled in memory even though they were gone. She wanted to hide, to vanish, but the human stepped forward, his voice cutting through the wood. "She's mine," he said. Calm but dangerous. "You want her? You'll pay in blood." The alley outside went silent. Then came low laughter, promises of violence. The hunters were not done. "Not yet," the girl whispered, her voice trembling. "They won't stop, they'll come again. Stronger." The human's hand rested on the door, his jaw tight. His eyes burned like fire. "Then I'll be stronger." That night she could not sleep. She sat near the table, hugging her knees, watching him as he sat near the door, his weapon ready. He never closed his eyes, not once. The silence between them grew heavy. Not empty, but full of unspoken things, she whispered softly. "I was nothing before you came," her voice broke. "Why risk your life for nothing?" He looked at her, his voice steady. "Because you're not nothing." Her tears fell silently. She pressed her face into her arms. The words tore her apart and mended her all at once. Outside, the hunters planned, their eyes sharp, their greed stronger than fear. Tomorrow they would try again, and tomorrow the human would face them. The girl did not know what the next day would bring, chains, blood, or freedom. But for the first time, she was not alone, and in the darkness, she whispered one fragile word almost too soft to hear. "Hope?" Dawn broke with a red sky, the city streets glowing under the light like rivers of fire. The girl watched from the broken window, her fingers tracing the cracks in the wood. Her stomach twisted with fear, but the human moved with calm. Purposeful steps across the small room. He loaded his weapon slowly, deliberately, checking every part with care. His face was hard, determined. But there was something in his eyes she hadn't seen before. Anger, sharp as a blade. Today they will come, he said quietly, almost to himself. And today they will leave empty-handed, the girl nodded, though her heart pounded wildly. I don't know if I can face them, she whispered, her voice trembling. He looked at her, his expression softening for a moment. You won't have to face them alone. Outside, the street was alive with movement. Shadows shifting, shapes creeping forward. The hunters had come again, armed, cruel, confident, their eyes glinting with the promise of violence. The girl pressed herself against the wall, her chest tight, but the human stepped forward, standing between her and the door. His weapon raised, his stance ready. One of the hunters shouted, his voice echoing, "Step aside, human. She belongs to us." The human didn't flinch. His voice was cold and steady. She belongs to no one but herself. And to me, if you try to take her, you'll regret it. The hunters laughed. A harsh, ugly sound, their leader, a tall alien with scars across his face, stepped forward, pointing a clawed finger at the door. Empty words. You're alone. No one will help you, human. The girl's hands shook. But the human did not move. He seemed to grow larger, stronger, as if the fear itself had no power over him. The leader snarled, "Take her, or we burn this place." The human's eyes narrowed. "Try it," he said simply. A moment of silence passed, heavy and tense. Then the hunters attacked, charging forward with claws, weapons in teeth. The human fired first. Not to kill, but to warn. The shots rang out, striking metal and stone, sending sparks flying. The hunters faltered for a moment, surprised by the precision. The girl ducked, heart hammering. She watched as the human moved like a storm, dodging, blocking, striking with the skill of someone who had fought all his life. Every movement calculated, powerful, unrelenting. One hunter lunged toward her, but the human intercepted, knocking him back with a sharp twist of his arm. "Get down," he shouted. The girl fell to the floor, covering her head. But through the dust and chaos, she saw him fight, his anger burning in every strike. The hunters were skilled, but they were not ready for someone who did not fear. He fought to protect her, not for money, not for power, but because he had promised, because someone had once been nothing, and now he would make sure she stayed something. The girl felt something shift inside her. She had been taught to obey, to hide, to fear, but seeing him fight for her, seeing him risk everything. She felt a spark, a small, defiant flame. She stood slowly, creeping to the corner, picking up a small stone. She had no weapon, nothing to fight with, but she remembered the words he had said. "You are not nothing." The first hunter broke through the human's guard. A knife raised high, ready to strike. The girl threw the stone with all her strength. Hitting the hunter in the head, he stumbled. And in that moment, the human reacted, disarming him with a swift, precise move. Her heart pounded. Adrenaline surging, she had never felt so alive. So dangerous, the fight continued, fierce and chaotic. But every time a hunter lunged toward her, the human was there, intercepting, striking, protecting. The hunters began to falter, confusion replacing their confidence. Finally, the leader, seeing his men falter, hissed, "Retreat! This isn't over, human." They disappeared into the shadows, leaving the street empty, silent. The girl sank to the ground, trembling, tears streaming down her face. They came for me," she whispered, voice breaking. "And you stopped them." The human knelt beside her, his hands on her shoulders, steadying her. "I told you," he said. "I promised, didn't I? You're not theirs, not ever again." She looked at him, awe and gratitude filling her chest. For the first time in her life, she believed someone would fight for her. Fight because she mattered. Fight because she was alive. The sun rose higher, casting light into the broken room, and for the first time, it felt warm, not harsh, not threatening. She whispered again, barely audible, "Thank you." He smiled faintly, the weight of exhaustion and victory in his eyes. "No, thank you. For letting me fight for something worth saving." Outside, the city was quiet, but the girl knew the hunters would return. She could feel their eyes in the shadows, waiting, plotting, but for now she was safe, and that was enough. And as they sat together in the rising sun, The girl felt something new take root inside her. Courage. A fragile but growing strength, and with it, a realization that she did not have to run anymore. Not while he stood beside her. The fight was not over. But the human had shown her a truth she would never forget. Even in a world that wanted to take everything from her, she could be more than fear, more than chains. She could be free, and one day, they would see that too. The streets were quiet now, the chaos of the fight fading like smoke into the morning. The girl stood beside the human, her eyes wide, scanning every shadow, expecting danger, but the hunters had gone. Retreating into the city's darkness for the first time, she felt something strange, relief, mixed with a strange lightness. Her chains had been invisible for years, but now, with him by her side, they seemed to vanish. She flexed her fingers, remembering the cold metal, the sting, the shame. The human looked at her, his expression soft. "We're not completely safe yet," he said, "but today, you've learned something important. You can fight back, you can survive." She nodded, words failing her. Her heart still pounded. But it was different now. Full of courage, full of fire. "Where do we go?" she finally asked. Her voice small, uncertain. He smiled faintly. "Somewhere far from this market, far from these people. Somewhere you can be yourself." They walked through narrow alleys, avoiding the main streets. The girl's steps were careful at first. Hesitant, then as the sun rose higher, she began to walk taller. Her head held high for the first time in years. The city seemed different now, brighter somehow. Not because the streets had changed, but because she had. The chains that had weighed her down were gone, replaced with something stronger. Something she didn't quite understand yet. Hope. They reached an old transport station. Abandoned and quiet. The human checked it carefully, making sure no one was following. Then he opened a small hatch, revealing a hidden compartment in the ground. "This will get us out," he said. "No one will find us here." The girl climbed inside, feeling a strange mix of fear and excitement. Will I ever be safe?" she whispered. The human sat beside her, tightening the straps around the hatch. "Safe isn't a place," he said. "It's people. It's courage. It's knowing you won't let anyone take you without a fight." She looked at him, understanding beginning to bloom. Then, "I am safe because of you," he shook his head. A small smile on his lips. "No, because of yourself." The transport activated, rumbling softly as it lifted into the air. The city below shrank. Its dark streets, its cruel markets, its hunters, all fading into memory for the first time. The girl allowed herself to breathe freely, to feel the wind in her hair, to imagine a life not dictated by chains or fear. She turned to the human, her eyes shining. I don't know how to thank you." He looked at her, serious. "Don't thank me. Live. That's the only thanks that matters." Hours passed as the transport flew over forests, rivers, mountains. The girl pressed her hands to the glass, watching the world change below, thinking of all the places she had never seen, all the freedom she had never known, and then she spoke. Quietly, almost to herself. I can choose now, can't I?" The human nodded. "Every choice is yours now." Her heart swelled with a strange joy. She had never understood what freedom meant. But now she did. It wasn't just being away from chains. It was being able to decide, to act, to live fully. The sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. The girl smiled for the first time without fear. Without hesitation, she felt alive, truly alive. They landed in a small village far from the city. Quiet and welcoming, the human led her through winding paths, showing her a small cottage. "This will be our home for now," he said. "Safe, quiet, yours." The girl stepped inside, touching the walls, feeling the air. It feels real," she whispered. He knelt down, looking her in the eyes. "It is real. And so are you." For a long moment, they simply looked at each other, understanding passing silently between them. The world outside was still dangerous, still cruel, but inside this little cottage, a new life had begun. The girl finally spoke, her voice strong. I want to live. I want to be free," the human smiled, standing beside her. "Then we begin, together." They walked outside into the soft glow of twilight. The girl felt the grass beneath her feet, the wind on her face, the warmth of the sun fading, but the light inside her growing. She looked at the human, a mix of gratitude and determination in her eyes. "I'll never forget what you did for me," she said. He shook his head. You don't need to. Just promise me you'll never forget yourself. She nodded, smiling. I promise. And as the stars began to sparkle in the darkening sky, the girl took her first full step into freedom, the chains of her past left behind, the shadows of fear fading, and a new life full of choices, courage and hope stretching out before her. She was free, finally free, and with him by her side, she knew she could face anything. Any danger, any cruelty, any dark shadow. Because she had learned the greatest truth of all, freedom was not given. Freedom was taken, and she had taken it. With fire in her heart and hope in her soul, she walked forward, leaving the darkness behind, stepping boldly into a world where she could finally be herself. The human followed silently, steadfast, ready for whatever came next, but for now there was only peace. Only the soft whisper of the wind and the quiet promise of tomorrow. They had survived, they had fought, and together, they had won the city, the hunters. The chains, they were all behind her now. And in their place was light, was choice, was life. She had been left unsold, left to the shadows, left to fear. But she had been found, protected, and shown that even in the darkest corners, someone could step forward and change everything. And as she looked up at the sky, full of stars and possibility, she whispered softly, I am free.